There are moments when God pulls back the curtain of time and allows us to see what's coming, not to scare us, but to prepare us. November 5th isn't just a date on the calendar. It's a prophetic checkpoint, a day when hidden things will be revealed, when truth and deception will collide. God showed me that this moment will expose what's been buried beneath comfort, compromise, and control. And the question is not what will happen on November 5th. The real question is what will happen in you when it comes. You see, family, one thing we've got to understand about God is that he never moves suddenly without first sending a signal. All throughout Scripture, God has always sounded an alarm before he shifted history. Before the flood came, Noah was told to build an ark. Before judgment hit Sodom, angels came to warn Lot. Before Israel stepped into freedom, God sent Moses with a message. That's the nature of our God. He's not trying to surprise his people. He's trying to prepare them. When God showed me what's connected to this coming season, what's tied to this date, this divine checkpoint, it was as if he whispered, "I'm not hiding my movement. I'm revealing it to those who are listening." But the problem today isn't that God has gone silent. It's that we've gone distracted. We live in a world where the noise is louder than the voice. We're scrolling more than we're seeking, reacting more than we're reflecting. And in that confusion, we lose the sensitivity to hear the divine frequency. God's warning isn't always wrapped in thunder. Sometimes it's a whisper in the soul. The question is, are we tuned in enough to notice it? Because the voice of God doesn't compete with the volume of the world. It calls you to step away from it. God always warns before he moves, because mercy always precedes judgment. He gives a window, a pause, a moment for reflection before the shaking begins. That's grace, that's love. He's saying, I want you ready. I want your heart aligned before the storm arrives. November 5 is not just a date. It's a symbol of that divine pause, that sacred space between revelation and response. It's God saying, I'm giving you time to prepare your spirit. Because what's coming next will separate those who only heard my word from those who actually believed it. Now, don't get it twisted. God's warnings aren't meant to terrify you. They're meant to transform you. They're an invitation to realign your focus, to break free from spiritual sleepwalking. Think about it. How many times has God tried to get your attention through the small tremors before the quake? Maybe through a restlessness in your spirit. Maybe through a door that's suddenly closed. Maybe through the frustration that's been forcing you to pray again. Those aren't random events. Those are divine alerts. Heaven doesn't send notifications for entertainment. It sends them for preparation. The human tendency, though, is to ignore the warning until the impact hits. We dismiss the small shifts because we're waiting for something dramatic. But the truth is, when you ignore the whisper, you often end up facing the whirlwind. God doesn't want you caught off guard. He wants you anchored when the shaking begins. That's why he keeps sending subtle reminders, not to scare you, but to stabilize you. You see, warning is actually an act of love. If God didn't care, he'd stay silent. But his love is so committed that he interrupts our comfort to save our calling. And right now, that's exactly what he's doing. He's saying, don't get too comfortable in the normal, 'cause I'm about to redefine it. The days ahead will test what we truly trust in. They will expose the foundations of our faith, And those who have built their confidence on culture will find it shaking beneath them. But those who have built their faith on Christ will discover that even when everything else trembles, the kingdom stands firm. So if you hear the warning, don't resist it. Respond to it. Let it push you to prayer, not panic. Let it call you to conviction, not confusion. Because every warning from God is a doorway to deeper wisdom. And here's the truth you've got to take with you. When God warns you, He's not trying to scare a heart. He's trying to strengthen it. We're living in a time when God is pulling back layers, and He's doing it with precision. He's exposing not to humiliate, but to heal. He's uncovering not to condemn, but to correct some of what's been happening in your life. The delays, the disruptions, the discomfort, it's not punishment, it's purification. God is saying, before I take you to where I promised, I've got to make sure you're clean enough to carry it. And it's not just personal. God is exposing at every level, spiritual, political, cultural. He's pulling the mask off systems and people who have presented one thing but practice another, because truth can't coexist with hypocrisy for long. Eventually, divine light demands honesty, so when you see chaos breaking out around you, leaders falling, institutions crumbling, alliances fracturing, don't be quick to assume it's all evil. Sometimes it's God doing housekeeping on a global scale. When He exposes, it means He's getting ready to elevate what's true. Now, here's the tension. Exposure feels uncomfortable. It shakes your confidence. It reveals what you thought you had hidden. It humbles your pride. But here's the deeper psychology of it. Without exposure, there can be no transformation. You can't heal what you won't reveal. And in spiritual terms, God cannot bless what He hasn't first brought into the light. Think of it like surgery. Before the healing can begin, the wound must be opened. The pain of exposure becomes the pathway to freedom. This is why we must stop seeing exposure as God turning against us and start recognizing it as God turning toward us. He's saying, I love you too much to let you stay in denial. I care too deeply to let you pretend. He exposes because He wants to elevate you beyond the limits of your own false identity. He knows that if He gives you success before sanctification, the success will destroy you. So He allows the pressure, the confrontation, the uncomfortable truth, because that's what refinizes your character. And if you've ever been in a season where it feels like everything you've been hiding is coming to light, take heart. That's not rejection, that's redirection. God is cleaning your lens so you can see clearly again. He's teaching you that elevation isn't about visibility. It's about integrity. It's about being the same person in private that you are in public, because the higher He takes you, the stronger your foundation must be. I believe November 5 symbolizes a global unveiling, a divine reset where what's fake will fall and what's authentic will rise. It's the moment when truth will confront illusion, and those who have built their identity on appearance will face the collapse of that illusion. But those who have allowed God to expose and cleanse their hearts will walk into the next season with authority and clarity. So don't resist the light. Let it in. Don't curse the exposure. Thank God for it, because when God exposes, He's not trying to destroy your story. He's rewriting it, and that's the beauty of His grace. Remember, this exposure is not God embarrassing you. It's God preparing you. When God revealed this next part of the message, it was sobering. He said, "I'm going to shake the confidence of man so that my people can rediscover the foundation of faith." And make no mistake, he's not just talking about global events. He's talking about the human heart, because before collapse happens in the world, it first happens in the soul. When your prayer life dries up, when your priorities drift, when your hope shifts from heaven to headlines, that's a personal collapse already in motion. Spiritually speaking, collapse is never punishment. It's correction. God dismantles what you built on pride so that he can rebuild what stands on purpose. When you've been leaning on your own understanding for too long, God will pull back his hand just enough for you to realize that without him, your strength isn't strength. It's strain. That's why certain doors close without warning, why relationships fall apart, why what used to satisfy suddenly doesn't. It's not that God abandoned you. It's that he's rescuing you from false security. Psychologically, we crave control because it gives us an illusion of power. But spiritually, control is often the enemy of trust. You can't walk by faith while clinging to everything that makes you feel safe. That's why sometimes God allows the structures you've leaned on to fall to teach you that peace isn't found in predictability. It's found in presence. When everything you counted on collapses, you discover that Christ is not just an option. He's the only foundation that never cracks. Look at history. Every empire that rose on arrogance eventually fell. Every system that exalted itself above truth eventually imploded. Why? Because no kingdom can outlast the king. And that's what November 5 symbolizes. A divine reminder that what man builds without God will eventually crumble under its own weight. The shaking that's coming is not just political or economic. It's spiritual. It's God exposing what we've been worshiping. It's him saying, "You've built towers to your own glory, but I'm calling you back to my glory." Now, this collapse isn't meant to destroy you. It's meant to deliver you. It's meant to strip away the illusion that you ever had control in the first place. God breaks the idol so you can see the truth. He allows the false comfort to fall so the real comforter can step in. He dismantles the temporary to remind you of the eternal. And if you pay attention, you'll notice that when things fall apart, that's often when your faith finally comes alive. Because it's only in the absence of certainty that trust becomes real. So don't curse the collapse. Don't panic when what you built begins to break. The fall isn't the end, it's the reset. It's God saying, "I'm tearing down the fragile so I can establish the unshakable." And once you've been through that kind of shaking, you stop depending on the applause of people or the promises of systems. You learn that the only real confidence is found in the one who cannot fail. Never forget this truth. When what's built on man collapses, what's rooted in God endures. We've gotten so used to blending in that we've forgotten we were called to stand out. We've been conditioned to believe that unity means silence, that peace means passivity, and that love means approval. But love that refuses to confront deception isn't love, it's neglect, and truth that refuses to speak up in darkness loses its authority. God is separating not because he's cruel, but because he's calling for clarity. He's saying, "My people can no longer live halfway between conviction and convenience." Spiritually speaking, there's a cleansing happening. The divide isn't about politics or nations, it's about hearts. It's about whether you're anchored in eternal truth or drifting with cultural tides. The darkness of deception has crept in so subtly that people have begun to confuse being informed with being transformed. But information without revelation only feeds pride. God is bringing us back to a place where truth won't just be something we quote. It'll be something we live. Now this separation will feel uncomfortable because it challenges identity. We've built relationships, careers, even self, worth around fitting in. But when God starts calling you out of the crowd, it can feel lonely. Yet, that loneliness is often the beginning of leadership. When God separated Abraham, he told him to leave the familiar because destiny requires distance from distraction. Separation doesn't mean superiority. It means sanctification. It means God is preparing you to carry something that can't survive compromise. Philosophically, this divide also represents the tension between appearance and authenticity. Many have learned how to look spiritual without actually being surrendered. They've mastered performance but lost connection. God's separation is his way of restoring authenticity to the faith. He's not impressed with presentation. He's after purity. When he starts distinguishing light from darkness, he's giving you a chance to step fully into alignment with who you were created to be. Not halfway, not occasionally, but completely. And make no mistake, this separation will not be subtle. It will expose the difference between those who follow God when it's popular and those who follow him when it's painful. Those who stand for truth when it costs them something, not just when it gains them applause. God is drawing a generation that refuses to dilute the gospel to stay accepted. He's raising people who won't trade spiritual authority for social approval. November 5 represents a turning point, a spiritual fork in the road where the middle ground disappears. You will either stand firm in the light or be swallowed by the shadows. This isn't a message of fear. It's a message of freedom, because once you decide who you are in God, you stop living for the validation of man. When you choose the light, you stop apologizing for shining. So let the separation come. Let God pull apart what's been pretending to blend, because only when darkness is exposed can the light fully reveal its power. And if you find yourself on the side of truth, stand boldly. Even if you stand alone, remember this. When God separates the light from the dark, he's not dividing you. He's defining you. We often talk about revival as if it's going to happen outside of us. But God said, before I send revival through you, I have to start revival in you. The remnant are those who allow that inner fire to burn even when culture goes cold. They're the ones who refuse to compromise conviction for comfort. They don't need applause to stay faithful, and they don't need a crowd to stay consistent. They understand that faith isn't proven when life is easy. It's proven when life is uncertain. Psychologically, the remnant represents spiritual resilience. It's the mindset of those who don't break under pressure, but deepen under it. They see testing not as punishment, but as training. You can't crush what's already surrendered, and that's what makes this remnant so dangerous to the enemy. They've learned how to die to self, so fear can't manipulate them anymore. They've stopped trying to survive and started learning how to stand. When you study Scripture, you see that God has always worked through a remnant. He didn't need the whole nation to part the Red Sea. He needed one Moses who believed, He didn't need an army to defeat Goliath. He needed one David with a sling in faith. He didn't need the entire world to carry his gospel. He started with 12 who were willing to walk away from everything. Every major move of God begins not with the many, but with the few who are fully yielded. And that's what this season is about. God isn't looking for numbers. He's looking for depth. And here's where it gets real. This remnant isn't made in comfort. It's forged in conflict. You'll know you're part of it because life won't let you settle. You'll feel a divine tension in your spirit that won't allow you to fit into mediocrity. You'll sense that calling pulling you out of circles that no longer feed your purpose. That's because God is refining you for something bigger than convenience. You can't lead a generation out of confusion if you're still attached to their approval. Theologically, this remnant represents God's continuity in chaos. When everything else fails, He keeps a people who carry His truth forward. They become the torchbearers of integrity, the carriers of conviction, the ones who hold on when everyone else lets go. And as the days grow darker, the light from this remnant will grow brighter. Not because they're louder, but because they're rooted. You don't need to be everywhere when you're established in eternity. November 5 is a prophetic reminder that God is not done with this generation. Even when institutions fall and systems fail, God always preserves a people. They may not have the spotlight, but they have the Spirit. They are the Daniels who refuse to bow, the Esthers who rise when silence feels safe, the Elijah who stand when the crowd runs. These are the ones who will carry the next wave of revival, not by power, not by influence, but by presence. So don't be discouraged by the chaos. Be encouraged by the calling. If you feel isolated, misunderstood, or set apart, it's not rejection, it's refinement. God is shaping you for remnant living. And remember this, God doesn't need the majority to make history. He just needs the remnant to stay faithful. We love to talk about faith, but very few people talk about the discipline of faith. Faith is not an emotion. It's a decision to remain grounded when logic can't explain what's happening. It's psychological stability born out of spiritual trust. It's the inner resolve that says, even when I can't trace Him, I still trust Him. That's what preparation looks like. It's not just gathering things in the natural. It's fortifying your spirit in the unseen. Because when everything begins to shake, your greatest weapon won't be your resources. It'll be your resilience. Preparation begins in the mind. You can't face spiritual battles with a distracted mentality. You can't navigate divine transitions while clinging to temporary attachments. God is calling His people to renew their thinking, to move from survival to strategy, from fear to focus. That's why some of you have been feeling this inner urgency, this divine unrest. It's not anxiety, it's activation. Heaven is saying, get your heart ready, get your priorities straight, anchor your identity in me before the winds begin to blow. Philosophically speaking, this moment calls for a reorientation of values. The world tells us to prepare by stockpiling possessions. God tells us to prepare by strengthening perspective because possessions can be lost. But perspective sustains you when your world, you is rooted in eternity. Temporary instability won't shake you. You'll be able to say like Paul, I've learned to be content whether I have much or little. That's the kind of preparation that produces peace in chaos. Preparation also means partnership. God doesn't warn you so you can hide. He warns you so you can help. This is the season to cover your family in prayer, to speak truth even when it's unpopular, to stand firm when everyone else folds. Preparation is not passive. It's active obedience. It's aligning your life so that when God moves, you're not caught off guard. You're caught up in His purpose. But let's be honest, it takes courage to prepare when others are still playing. It takes maturity to stay consistent when the culture around you is distracted. Yet, that's the essence of faith. Building the ark before the rain falls, that's what Noah did. He looked foolish until it started raining. And that's what some of you will look like to others when you start getting serious about your calling, your discipline, your devotion. They may laugh now, but they'll understand later. Because when the shaking starts, what you built in private will sustain you in public. This is why God keeps repeating the same message. Prepare your heart, because faith that's untested is faith that's unproven. The time for casual Christianity is over. The time for cultural faith is done. This is the era of convictional believers, people who live what they claim to believe. Preparation is proof of expectation. You don't get ready for something you don't believe is coming. So the question tonight isn't what will happen on November 5. The question is, will you be ready when it does? Because ultimately this is not about prediction, it's about position. The ones who are anchored in God's word will not just survive the storm, they'll stand as beacons of hope through it. And here's the truth I want to leave you with. When you live prepared, you stop reacting to the world and start responding to